we did have a fact pattern where a client did not want to invest in DSTs in Florida because they were worried about the rising water level and global warming. Honest to God. And we said, that's okay. We're not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. We're here to just present, and then you decide how you want to play your chess game.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we help you discuss the various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. On today's episode, we're actually doing something a little bit different. First off, we're going to give you a twofer. We've got Peter May and Rubin, who run the connected websites of DST Sherpa and 1031 Sherpa, which is a financial investment firm. And we're going to be talking about some very unique financial strategies for investing and preparing for your future, as well as the legal aspects of them and everything else. Peter himself will occasionally joke he's a former CPA and recovering tax attorney, so he has a specialized amount of information in this field, and I think we're going to have a really good discussion, and I'm hoping to learn things on this discussion that I haven't learned. So before we begin anything else, Peter and Ross, thanks for joining today. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, Justin. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, and the recovery continues.
The recovery continues. Well, let's jump over and take a look at least one of your sites. So I don't have the other one pulled up right now. Would the other one be 1031sherpa.com if I were to guess, or
you're right on. You got it.
All right. Well, we'll just pull it up really quickly. So they have two websites. One of them is 1031sherpa.com. And no, I typed it in wrong, probably. We'll call it. We'll find it later. We'll get it down below. As always, we will have our guests' links in the show notes below. But this is DST Sherpa, which stands for Delaware Statutory Trust, DST Sherpa. And I guess Peter kind of leans more on the DST side. Ross leans on the 1031 side. We're going to talk about what both those are. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for a way to invest in your future, these are guys who have a wealth of knowledge at their fingertips. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. They actually do offer a complimentary webinar that'll probably dive even deeper than we can dive into today to help you guys learn what you can do to prepare for your future. So we will be talking more about DST Sherpa, how they help accredited investors navigate complex real estate exit strategies by providing custom guidance on Delaware Statutory Trusts. Goodness, 1031 exchanges and wealth preservation planning. They do offer a holistic approach that integrates tax deferral, diversification, passive income solutions tailored to each client's financial goals. Before we begin, though, we are also going to read from our sponsors, and our first sponsor today is Rank with News. Is not being featured in the news regularly costing your firm or your business money, visibility, and credibility? Do you feel that getting found in Google search is more about dumb luck than science? What if there was a guaranteed way to get your firm or your business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Bloomberg, Reuters, AP News, and others, and see those articles rank locally, even nationally, sometimes in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people are actually searching for? If that was the case, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one in under 2 weeks, safely, organically, and permanently. It's like guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business, please visit rankwithnews.com and learn more. Book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page one in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers with rankwithnews.com. Our second sponsor at the top of the show is Groove Funnels. Entrepreneurs and dream chasers, listen up. Running an online business does not have to mean drowning in subscriptions or wrestling with a messy tech stack. Groove.cm is rolling out a jaw-dropping limited-time offer. You can run your entire operation. Think stunning websites with Groove pages, high-converting sales funnels, email campaigns, e-commerce stores, even affiliate programs, all for one low price for the entire year. That's $2.99. And you can actually try it for 30 days for free. No credit card required up front. And millions of users are already saving thousands of dollars and scaling their businesses smarter with this all-in-one platform that replaces everything from ClickFunnels to Shopify and more. There's no risk, no hidden fees, just pure powerful growth tools to help you build your business and build what matters most. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to learn more today and sign up. That is theattorneypost.com/groove. All righty, and let me get control of my Zoom window again here. All right, so a really brief introduction to both Peter and Ross. Peter, again, former CPA and tax attorney in recovery. He's co-founder of DST Sherpa, operating under Alpha Star Capital Management LLC, and he brings a deep expertise in taxation, financial planning, and real estate strategies. He holds a BS in accounting from St. Louis University, a JD from Capital University Law School, and an LLM in taxation from Villanova, as well as he's a certified financial planner who passed the CPA and the NASD Series 7 exams. Ross, meanwhile, holds an MBA from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and earned his undergraduate degree in finance from the University of Florida. As a managing partner of DST Sherpa since 2025, that is this year, and previously an investment advisor representative at Alpha Star Capital Management, he specializes in guiding accredited investors through tax deferral strategies using the 1031, 1033 exchanges and Delaware Statutory Trusts, while also blending broader tax preparation, retirement positioning, and more. Now, that was a mouthful, and I don't think I even scratched the surface. So I guess my first question to both of you guys, and whoever wants to lead first, maybe Peter, you can go first. What did I miss? Tell me a little bit more about you. Tell me about who you are and what makes you you.
Tennis is my drug of choice. I just say it up front. If I could have it 3 times a week or more, it would be great. As a person gets a little bit older, you got to make sure the muscles are still there. Really love educating, really love trying to give people transparency. Probably one of the most interesting things was going to law school and taking con law, which is one of those things that you're like, ugh, got to take it. And as I like to say, the more you know, KNOW, the more you find out where the NO is. And what was a law today wasn't a law yesterday until somebody litigated it most of the time. And so that's what segues into the world of 1031s and DSTs. One's been around for 100 years, one's been around for about 20 years. We'll let you guess which as we get into the podcast meat and potatoes. So I hand the mic back.
Well, how about you, Ross? Tell me about who you are and what
All right.
what define yourself.
Well, look, I got into the business about 21 years ago. It was my father's passed away at that time, suddenly and unexpectedly. Was living down in Atlanta, and as you noted in the intro, my school backgrounds are all in the Southeast, and but I'm born and raised in the Philadelphia area, so came back up to Philadelphia at that time with my wife, and who was not my wife at that time, and dragging someone out of the Southeast up to the cold white Northeast here in Philadelphia. Not easy to do, but we've been here since then. Have 2 kids. One's getting ready to go off to college, another in high school, and like I said, been in this game for about 21 plus years now, and connected up with Peter about 15 years ago, and the rest is history. And here we are.
So you got into the game as right after that is when DST became a thing. Is that right? That's
Well,
if I'm
yeah,
not mistaken.
yeah. I mean, 2004. You're exactly right. 2004. There's a revenue ruling. The IRS had a revenue ruling in 2004 that made DSTs come of age or become established. 2004, and then the DSTs came about, and then we all know what happened in 2008, right? So all of a sudden, DSTs, which really capitalize on the fact that on appreciated real estate. Well, 2008 happened, and values kind of came down, and then DSTs kind of came back in vogue, kind of in their early teens, let's say. And today, probably 2025 is going to DSTs will represent about 7 billion or so in transaction volume. So decent sized industry with some really good players at the top of that. So that's exactly right. And look, you had mentioned that DST Sherpa. We've been working with DSTs for about 6 years now, I would say. So we've seen a little bit of the evolution, and then we know what happened in 2020 with COVID. Things went on a little bit of pause, and then came back and went roaring in 2021, 2022, and things are, like I said, percolating now with probably on course to be 7 billion plus in the industry transaction volume.
A funny side story to that, Justin, is um, we were at a conference via Alpha Star. Gosh, it must have been about 7 years ago. And we're listening to a presentation about DSTs, and Ross and I are sitting next to each other, watching and listening. And the person makes the discussion and presents about DSTs, and I get this sharp elbow pain in my rib. And he's like, "What the hell's going on here?" He goes, why am I just hearing about this now? I thought you're the, former CPA, JD, LLM, MOUSE, all that CFP stuff. Where is this coming from?" I'm like, "Okay, we can't know everything about everything. I'm learning a new trick." And the reason I bring that funny story up is that's what we run into almost every day.
Yeah.
It's what you don't know that can really get you, and you can't know everything, which evolved into what we call our 4-quadrant approach of planning. Tax return, your tax return, your cash, your investment positioning, and your estate preservation. We all have these specialists we go to, and it's almost like your health. You got somebody for your knee, one's for your shoulder, all this, but then who's up top running the show?
Mhm.
And that's where we learned. And then also because way, 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 way a long time ago in the world of Arthur Anderson is when I learned about real estate. And it's one of those multi-dimensional investments that hits everything all the time. So from that, it was like, you know what? We got to get together with this. And a side note on it, when people hear Delaware Statutory Trust, they're like, "Well, I don't own real estate in Delaware. How can I use this?" And so, as Russ said, in 2004, a bunch of smart people went to the IRS and got Revenue Ruling 2004-86. And as we know, when your dad says, "This is what we're going to call this," you don't change it ever again. And they referred to it as a Delaware Statutory Trust. It just means that's the wrapper in layman's terms, but the properties can exist anywhere in the United States. So I hand it back.
Gotcha. Well, it's good to know. We're going to dive even deeper into that here in just a little bit. So let me ask you this, and I know, Peter, you had started in law, and then as we've joked now a couple times, you're a recovering tax attorney. Tell me about your journey for both of you. What led you into this particular field? Like, did you always know, Peter, you wanted to be an attorney? Ross, were you always looking at, and I know you're not a practicing attorney now, but were you looking at, the MBA and you just knew that business was your route? What got you guys into financial investing? And then also, why Sherpa, right? Did one of you guys take a trip through the Tibetan, the Himalayas or whatever, and you just really had a great experience, or is it just kind of a fun name? Where did the history and the story of
I'll answer that. Yeah, so yeah, I think I had a dream one night and I woke up. I said, "Peter, we're gonna call our firm DST Sherpa," and then 1031 Sherpa came after that. And Peter's like, "Well, why the heck? What's going on with that?" And I said, "Well, a Sherpa, think about it. Those are the guides at Mount Everest and in the Himalayas that help and carry the heavy stuff, that do the heavy lifting, literally, for the hikers climbing up the mountains." And that's kind of what we are. We're the guides. We're doing the heavy lifting for the client, for the investor, as to DSTs, as to 1031 exchanges, and that's really our role, to be that fiduciary for the investor. Because look, there's depending on the day of the week, 60 plus DST sponsors out there, 80 to 100 DSTs that are investable at any one point in time. How the heck are you going to choose which ones are better than or better fit than others? So that's how how Sherpa fits into the name. And then find your exit, find your strategy. I mean, that kind of encapsulates it all. We're the guide helping the investor find their exit and find their strategy.
And of course, if you look at the picture, because that's the fun part, you got this building, right? And you got the mountains, then you got a setting sun, and then you got the nice little dot in the middle, which is, where's your target? And when you think about it, okay, you get on an airplane. What's the first thing they tell you to do? In the event of something, here's where the exits are. And oftentimes people get into something without figuring out how they get out of it. And that's kind of when I say the genesis for it, that makes that happen. Your earlier question right before of, how did we get to today? I was, of course, get your accounting degree, go work for the big eight, Arthur Andersen. From there, you're going to go back to law school. And I worked as one of the in-house attorneys for an insurance planning shop. We did a lot of design work for privately held businesses and individuals that were worth 20 million and up. Because whether you like insurance or not, it is part of the game plan. And it can be used with legislative grace, as I like to say, not a loophole, legislative grace, because somebody passed it, somebody voted on it. Whether or not the vice president had to be the tie-breaking vote, that's my little thing in there. It's part of the rules and part of the game. And from there, Ross and I crossed paths, and it was more of, you like doing this, I like doing that. If we put these things together, it really works.
Gotcha. So, well, let's just dive into the DST stuff because I'm kind of curious about this, and we'll run this podcast a little different than I would normally do. What is the typical profile of somebody who would be a good candidate for DST investment, and who isn't a good candidate? And when somebody's first introduced this concept, what is the biggest mind shift they have to make?
I would say the biggest mind shift, that's a great question, Justin, is really going from active management or active ownership of real estate to a passive stance of ownership of real estate. That's what DSTs are. They're passive ownership of institutional level real estate. So, we find the one of the challenges is folks who own real estate, they like having that control. I mean, who doesn't, of managing the real estate, determining when they're going to sell it or what they're going to do with it. In a DST, they are really handing the reins over to professional management. It's not us; it's the DST sponsor that is doing the active management. And so, yeah, you better make sure that who you're handing the reins over to is going to do a good job. So, that is one of the biggest mind shift is, okay, I'm ready to exit my strategy going from being an active owner. I'm ready to shift to passive and truly passive, to hand the reins over, and I'm still going to get the benefits of real estate in terms of the cash flow, depreciation, all of those things that real estate owners like. So that's what we found to be the biggest mind shift.
That makes sense. Peter, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Who can do it? You need to be an accredited investor, which means you got to have $1 million, not counting your house. Probably the other component of it is it needs to be a piece of your assets. So let's say you've been working, you got your 401k, and you have this one rental property that is now worth $1 million. That's a large piece of, if it's a large piece of your balance sheet, we're not discouraging from people doing it. We're just trying to make sure that they're fully aware and that it's completely transparent of this is what you're doing.
And to jump in on that, if it is a large piece, we would potentially recommend that, not all of it go into a DST, maybe a piece of it, so that you have the proper asset allocation and not overweight and overly concentrated. Yes, you may have been, you own that piece of real estate for a number of years, but once upon a time, you bought it for a much lower number, much lower value than what it's valued today, and you kind of just grew into it a lot of times, it became a large piece of the entire balance sheet just by sheer appreciation of the real estate itself. Necessarily didn't intend it to be that way, but that's where you are today. And we would recommend potentially that you look at the big picture, as Peter said, the 4 quadrants and the allocation, and maybe it's wise to do only a piece into a DST from a concentration perspective.
And to dovetail on this, one of the things when we're in the midst of, getting into it up to your elbows, and I'll use a client case that we worked on, is we almost demand to talk to their CPA or their tax preparer, because we have a client and, bought a piece of property in an investment area for 300,000. It's now worth 900. They want to go sell it. And what we said is, let's go to your tax preparer, and it was June, and say, if you sold this for cash, what's Uncle Sam and what's the state of X going to take from you? Not, I think, a sort of, kinda. And what happened in this case was the client, because of their high W-2, had a lot of passive activity carry forwards. So what that means is, if you have a property that's throwing off losses because of depreciation, you can't take those losses because you make too much on your W-2. Well, those losses get to carry forward. So in this case, when the client sold the property for 900,000, 100,000 was free boot. They got to take that money because they had carry forwards that they had not been able to use. So we came across as another hero, because they got to walk away from the transaction with some cash in their pocket. But it's making sure the person, having been a former CPA, actively is planning and actively considering the tax implications today, versus waiting until March of next year to say, oh my God, I could have done A, B, or C.
Ross, you had said a little bit ago that DSTs are often marked as passive and as stable. You're
Yeah.
letting go of the reins and letting someone
Right.
else, do some of the work. What are the risks that people sometimes overlook when considering a DST, and how do you evaluate and vet a DST sponsor before presenting them as your client?
Yeah, that's a great question. We put a high value on due diligence. Due diligence, not only at the sponsor level, but also due diligence at the individual DST level. So, one of the things that I think investors sometimes overlook is they look at potentially one thing. What is my annual cash flow? Well, this one's 6.1 and that one's 5.7. So the 6.1, I like that because I'm going to get more cash flow. Okay, so we all know that there's a reason. There are different reasons why the cash flow is higher or lower when you're looking at comparing two DSTs or a number of DSTs. A lot of factors go into that. Obviously, one is risk. One maybe carry more inherent risk than another because it's a certain property type. It may be a hospitality, like a hotel, versus one maybe a triple net national credit tenant, which is more stable and we would say less risky. Also, like I said, there's location. These DSTs are located in different states. Some may be in lower tax state jurisdictions. So we need to be careful. An investor who lives in Florida probably doesn't want to take on a DST that's based in the state of California, for example, because the associated taxes that gets tagged to that. So those are the things that we help bring to light and help educate. And again, we do this from an educational perspective because, like we said, most investors, they haven't engaged with DSTs in the past, and so we want to bring that due diligence to bear, and also our experience in working with the different sponsors and different fact patterns that we've seen along the way.
You said California's out in part due to the taxes. Would that matter if you lived in California versus Florida? And
Yeah.
if California's out, not out, but maybe we don't want to look at that one so much. We prefer the places. Where are the states that people ought to be looking for? Where the sponsor is?
Yeah, well, let me your first question about California. We found that those that invest in a California DST are probably residents of California or another high tax state. So it's less of and the DST itself may be desirable enough that they're okay. They're already in a high tax jurisdiction, so that may be acceptable for part of their DST allocation. So we're not saying throw all of it into a particular DST, but that may be a component. Maybe you like it because it's in this has a certain property type with a certain tenant in a certain industry that that's something that you believe that has great growth prospects. So we may allocate 20% of your DST funds into that particular DST, and the others, the other states typically we found are a lot in the southeast and the south central. So as you would imagine, some of the lower tax jurisdictions. However, we don't necessarily want that tail to wag the dog, because there are a lot of very good deals DSTs that may be in states with not the highest taxes, but maybe not zero taxes, and that's okay, because we want to make sure that the underlying investment is sound and is going to meet the expectations or the projections that the DST sponsor has provided. So again, we don't want the tail wagging the dog in that sense either. Same thing about chasing the high interest or high distribution percent rates on the cash flow.
Gotcha.
We did have a fact pattern where a client did not want to invest in DSTs in Florida because they were worried about the rising water level and global warming. Honest to God. And we said, that's okay. We're not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. We're here to just present, and then you decide how you want to play your chess game.
How do DSTs compare to other passive real estate vehicles like REITs or opportunity zones?
Fairly well. Go ahead, Ross.
Yeah, I would say let's take the REIT example. They do compare well to a lot of the big REITs that are out there. I'm not going to name names, but you do a search and you come up with 4 or 5 the big names. They are comparable. Again, most DSTs in of themselves, one DST is focused on a certain property type, maybe multifamily, it may be industrial, it may be medical office, and versus a REIT may be more generalized and have allocations across a number of different property types and industries. So when you look at an individual sector, those returns, et cetera, may be a little bit different than the overall big pattern. And generally, we recommend a portfolio of DSTs that covers a different different property types, different industries. So you get more of a diversified approach that sort of mimics a REIT approach, where you have coverage in a number of different industries. One industry that is, or one property type that is not recommended and hasn't been, is, as you may guess, is office. So we really don't allocate to office, and quite frankly, there are very, very few office based DSTs.
Gotcha. I don't know if you had anything. I'm usually giving you like an extra half second pause just to see if
Well, yeah, no, that pause actually helped me. Thank you. No, part of it, the other thing when you're looking, as Ross said, between the types, you're also looking at the returns, not necessarily quantitatively, but qualitatively, meaning a REIT throws off dividends. And the other difference is you're going out of one investment, your $1 million building. If you want to go into a REIT, you got to pay the tax man to get there. If you're going from your building to a DST, you don't have to pay the tax man, assuming everything levels out. And some people will go from a hard building via a 1031 into a DST or an opportunity zone also, because the opportunity zones are set up to shield capital gain. So you've got this nice little cocktail that you're fixing all the time. And one of the pieces that you're looking at is cash flow. How soon somebody goes into a DST, they're going to get a check next month. And those are some of the, as we like to say, allocation of the asset, the location, state, and type, and then the cash flow coming back, depending on the volume of it, what type of taxation is being triggered.
One other thing that I want to comment on, Peter, you raised it on the opportunity zones. We found that they play best in, let's say, medium basis property. For instance, you take the $1 million, you sell a property for $1 million. If the basis, for example, in that property is $100,000, so you have, big capital gain, depreciation, recapture, that 900,000, probably best fit for a DST. Same example, or a little bit different example, $1 million sale, but the basis is 500,000. So, you have a decent gain, some depreciation, but the basis is 500. Maybe a fit for an opportunity zone, because as Peter said, that you can allocate just the gains, capital gains, into that opportunity zone, and you can take the basis and go invest it separately. So that 500 you don't have to put into the opportunity zone. So that's one of the differences and the nuances that we look at is, where's the basis relative to the sale price? And going back to what Peter said at the beginning, how big is the tax bite if you were to just sell and not just sell and take your money and go home?
Gotcha. For my listeners who may not know, and I'm still not 100% on this, so I'm still trying to just probe and learn more. What is the interplay between a 1031 and the DST?
Yeah.
And when does it make sense for a 1031 exchanger to consider a DST instead of another active property?
Yeah. So the 1031 exchange, or it's called 1031 like kind exchange, that allows an investor, an owner of investment real estate, and it's not your personal residence, not your beach home or your lake home, unless you rent it out. And there's certain detailed rules about that, which we may or may not get into on this podcast. But the point is the 1031 like kind exchange allows the taxpayer to exchange like kind property, sell their property, investment property, and purchase a replacement property and defer the taxes, defer the capital gains tax, defer the depreciation recapture, defer the net investment income tax, defer the state taxes. So defer potentially four levels of taxes utilizing 1031 exchange. When a DST can be used in a couple of scenarios. One, if someone who is, they've owned the property for a number of years and they're just ready to retire from real estate. And that's one of the questions we ask. How are you going to retire from real estate? And they're ready for that exit. And the DST provides that off-ramp. So it allows them that tax deferral of those four levels of taxation. And it allows them to become passive, meaning they just received a direct deposit into their bank account every month from the rent that is paid by the tenant of the DST. And so they're out of the game. They're out of the game, and they don't have the hassles. They don't have to worry about the terrible T's, toilets, tenants, trash, as they say. And so they become totally passive, which for a lot of people is a perfect exit strategy, off ramp from being that landlord for a number of years. So that's one way. The other way, in a 1031 exchange, we've seen even someone who's investing in another real property. We always recommend that they name a DST as a backup, because a lot of times these properties that they identify, and there's a short identification period in 1031 exchanges of 45 days. 45 days to identify that next property. Well, they can certainly identify it, but what if it falls through? The inspection doesn't come back. It needs a ton of repairs that they didn't know, at the time that they first identified it. Well, they can always fall back into the DST and preserve their 1031 deferral. So those are the two biggest instances we see of how 1031s and DSTs are linked together.
But
You
wait,
elaborate.
there's more. I have to throw in a third one. The what we like to call leftovers or table scraps. So you sell a property for $1 million, and through your realtor or person, you find a replacement property for $1 million. But then when you go to closing, you find a surprise. So now you bought that replacement property for $900,000. Even though you got a great deal, everybody's happy, but that real estate owner is a little torqued that they just have $100,000 of boot, which is the term used for any cash left over. Well, that boot's going to get taxed at 30%. So the realtor came through and got a replacement building and rescued it on the last day and got the price dropped from $1 million to $900,000. Well, why not take that 100 and dump it into a DST? It may not be the best thing that the person likes. However, that 100,000 saved them 30,000 in taxes, and we refer to that as either table scraps or leftovers.
Well, I wouldn't mind $30,000 in table scraps.
Exactly.
Right.
And one of the things I want to point out, the DSTs, they're a medium-term parking lot. So it's not necessarily like you're locked into this forever. Generally, DSTs average around 5 years. We like to say 4 to 7. Some DSTs have an actual business plan where they say they intend for a liquidity event in 4 to 5 years. Others say it's probably going to be a 5 to 10 year hold. And again, depending on the investor's preferences, their desires, and et cetera, we help guide them to appropriate investments within DSTs. One thing I do want to mention, there are some DST provider sponsors that do what's called a 721 UPREIT, and I'm probably throwing some more jargon out there, but it will, after 2 to 3 years, some sponsors will force the investor into a 721 UPREIT, which means your DST ownership gets gobbled up into their REIT. And that's not a taxable transaction either. That you continue the deferral train. However, there's really, that ends your 1031 ability. So you can no longer do another 1031 exchange for those funds. Either you stay in that REIT forever, or you can exit. And when you do exit, then there's taxes to be paid. And you can, you don't have, when I say exit, you can exit a little bit at a time and pay a little bit of taxes along the way. But it is the end game in terms of 1031. So you can't 1031 out of it into a hard property down the road. Whereas in the DST, that doesn't go that route. When there is a liquidity event, you can 1031 back into a hard property of your choice, go into another DST, take the cash, pay the taxes, or any combination thereof. So there's a lot of nuance that, again, we help guide the investors through, depending on what their goals are, what their ideal is.
Gotcha. Let me see if I can put this in a way that'll yield more of a visual story. Can you tell me about a time, maybe one of the most satisfying or unexpected client outcomes that you've ever experienced when it comes to using a 1031 or a DST strategy?
Great question. We're in the middle of that right now. So we have a client who Ross and I went to visit with them from a planning perspective because they wanted to make sure that their wills and trusts and finances. And as we talked with husband and wife, all the boxes just kept on checking. Everything's good. It's almost like at the end, it's like, well, I'll tell you what, can you take us out to lunch for giving you a free review or making sure everything's there? And then all of a sudden, the wife looks over to the husband and says, well, what about that building? And all of a sudden, like, well, what building? Well, he was a doctor, one of three, and the building is something that is still part of their holdings, and they're trying to get out of it. In a way, it's a little sticky and it's a little this and a little this. So by helping them navigate it, this is one of the problems that we're helping to eliminate, provided all three or four, all the physicians stay alive until after the property sells. But it's really helping people fix problems, because on probably a monthly basis, I run into a number of people that say, Peter, I wish I had known you a year ago. I wish I had, because you're presenting to them optionality that they did not know existed.
And also, not only did they not know the physicians, but their realtor, their CPA, their attorney did not know about the DST. So our point is, we love to help educate professionals as well as the investors in terms of explaining the intricacies, the nuances, and how it can benefit someone who is seeking an exit from their real estate. This particular situation, it was a vestige from when the physicians practiced, and they all retired probably 10 years or so ago, and they had been renting it out, but it's time. It was time to sell that real estate. And, we were able to make it so each of them can do their own thing independently. Some of them may want to do a DST, some may not, and that's okay. But the point is, we took something that was together and was able to decouple it so that each individual was able to make their own decision and invest as to what's in what is their own best interest in their desires.
So
that was really helpful.
All right. So for the purposes of the 4th of July, if you really liked my chocolate chip ice cream, I've got a cookies and cream that's going to blow your mind. And so you think of it that way. If you really like this, if this was tasteful and enjoyable, try some of this other stuff. And everybody starts to say, okay, but it's too complicated. Well, it's not that complicated if you break it down.
As long as you've got a Sherpa to guide you.
Well, thank you very much. The hardest part in the process is what I just did. I have to be quiet for like 3 to 5 seconds until the person you're talking to says, but I've got a Sherpa. And I'm like, damn fine thing that is, isn't it?
I think Ross, a minute ago you had mentioned the building that they wanted to sell, as long as the 4 physicians stay alive. What happens if one of them dies? And have you ever had a DST deal fall apart in some way? Like, I don't know what that would even look like. And how do you turn something like that around?
I'll let Peter jump in on that question because that's more of a legal
A
question in
non-legal,
terms of
legal response.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
I'm going to give you an answer, but you can't rely on it. Okay.
We give the disclaimer at the end as well. You guys who
I
listen
know,
regularly,
no.
no legal advice, no investment advice. We're talking about the topics, but none of
Yeah,
this should
no.
be misconstrued as advice
We,
or
I,
tax advice.
I always joke about that from the standpoint of, here's my opinion, but you can't use it for anything, even a cup of coffee. So if a person passes away, and let's take, 5 partners, if one of them dies, that piece of it is still owned. Everybody owns a 1/5 interest. You can still do a 1031 with an estate. You can do a 1031 with a number of different people. However, so let's say the 3 of us have a building. We do a 1031. So Justin has a third, Peter has a third, Ross has a third, and I go to the hereafter sooner than the other 2, then my children inherit my interest and they get a step up in basis. So in 5 years, when this DST rolls over, the 2 of you are worried about where you're going to roll into a new DST. My kid is saying, I'll just take the cash because I got a step up in basis and there's no taxes due. Now, one of the questions that comes up, I think you alluded to, is what if an investment doesn't go north and it goes south or it goes flatline? There is no guarantee. This is where our due diligence comes in. And back to Ross talking about, if there's 50 different DSTs on the market, we view a DST as a wealth protector. You bought the property at $500,000, it's now worth $2 million. What are we doing to protect that $2 million? It may not be sexy, it may not double, it may not do different things, but we're going with what I like to say, boring and beautiful. We're going with something that is going to keep plodding along and understand that the DST sponsor who's running the building, 1 minute, please, pardon. The DST sponsor who's running the building, they can't go out and raise more money after the initial offering. There's certain limitations that a DST can't do. So they're going to have a bigger bank reserve, a bigger reserve as they're paying it out. You're getting your cash flow. You are also playing with house money. Remember, 30% or more was going to go to Uncle Sam. So where we look at it is to say, you bought for $1 million. You went into a DST with $2 million because let's say your property doubled. This is where the ongoing monitoring of it comes through. Here's your cash flow. Here's your depreciation. We've had a couple that on occasion, they decided to cut back on their monthly payout, but their balance sheet hasn't suffered. So it means that they've decided to keep a little bit more in reserves versus paying out. Now, sometimes the client doesn't like hearing that because they want their extra couple dollars every month. Does that answer your question?
I think so, more or less anyway, as much as much as it can. Again, this is heady issues. I'm going to recommend everybody go visit DSTSherpa.com, sign up for the webinar because I'm sure we're just barely scratching the surface and probably not even getting to the meat and potatoes of really how powerful this strategy can be. Let me ask you this. I'm sure people come to you guys with misconceptions about what you can do, what you can't do, what a DST is, what the 1031 strategy looks like. And what are a couple of the biggest misconceptions people bring on a regular basis that if you could disabuse people of these misconceptions, you would do it on a permanent basis?
Can't use the money next year.
Yeah.
So I bought the building for 250 and I'm going to sell it for $1 million, put it in DST, and next year I want to buy a Maserati or something. You can't.
These are illiquid investments. Full stop. Yeah, I said medium-term parking lot, all of that. But look, if you think you might need the money in a year or two or whatever, we would advise not to invest in a DST or reduce your investment size into the DST so that the cash that you have or need on the sideline is there. So that's probably the biggest thing we run into and misconception, or what people want. And I get it. Be great to have access to the money on demand, but these are illiquid investments. And look, they're securities. It's securitized real estate. They are governed by the SEC and on file with the SEC, and that's why folks need to use an investment advisor in order to transact in DSTs. Because we see this, and this goes to your question also. There'll be investors that'll call up a sponsor and say, "Hey, I have $1 million. Where do I send the check, or where's my QI send the check?" And the sponsor will nicely say, "Well, that's wonderful, and we appreciate your interest in our DST. However, we're going to direct you to an advisor, and here's a name or some names of advisors that you can contact in order to transact in a DST." So that's something that we want to, and that's why we're here. That's why we exist, to help provide that guidance to the investor.
Now, that being said, let's go back to their illiquid. With proper planning, so now we're going to go back to the building you bought for $250,000, and it's now worth $1 million. And let's say you go to your friendly bank and you pull $400,000 out. So it's worth $1 million, but you got a $400,000 mortgage against it. And then let's say a year and a half later, you want to sell that building. So you sell it for $1 million. You have $600,000 left because you paid the bank back $400,000, and you take the $600,000, you can go into leveraged DSTs. And what that means is, for the $600,000 you're putting in, it may also have, and I'm using 50-50 for math purposes, the building you're going into may be half cash, half debt. So when you put your $600,000 in, you're also picking up $600,000 of non-recourse debt that doesn't impact you. So it's as if you sold a building for $1 million and bought a new building for $1.2 million, using $600,000 of cash and $600,000 of debt. The beautiful part about that is that $400,000 that you borrowed from the bank 2 years ago, you've pulled out of the deal. You just can't do it the day before. There's certain, for the people out there, form over substance, substance over form. Those are two of the "it depends" issues that are rank all through the tax code and the legal piece. So with proper planning, and two of the questions that we always ask is, what's your, so Justin, what's your current reality? Tell me about your world. Tell me about your investments, your real estate, and what kind of hot mess Justin West is. And then we go.
We're diverse.
What?
We're diversified for sure.
Okay. But depending on also the emotional issues in your world can impact the financial need. That's, so the total picture. And then we'll say, what's your ideal? Where do you want to be in 3 years or 6 years? And this gets into the exit and the strategy, because let's say Justin is about 60, 65 years old. Well, are you going to be doing this in 10 years when you're almost 80? Well, when you're 40, you said yes. Because when you're 40, 80 is one of those mythical numbers that really doesn't exist. That was your parents or your grandparents. So that's the other piece of it. With proper planning, there's some really cool things you can do with what I like to call legislative grace, not loopholes.
I like that. Legislative grace, and always play with the house money. I think
and unless you're in a rush, now we'll have some clients that they have a nice balance sheet, they've got a portfolio, they've got investments, they've got X properties. We'll say, let's go to the bank and get one of those super credit cards, something that you can borrow against your balance sheet. So if something happens, we're not tapping something individually. And then the other component on it that really hits in is time. Meaning, let's say you have 10 properties. 4 of them you think are stellar, 4 of them are average, okay, and 2 of them are real dogs. They're sucking up your time. Well, I work on it. It's like, well, I don't think Justin likes to work for $10 an hour because that's what it's paying him back. So if we look at this and if we help the client be honest with themselves, it's like you're barely breaking even on these. All it's going to take is one real estate tax hike or insurance hike to put you underwater. Why not take those 2 properties for $1 million each, DST them? So now you could be earning 4%, part of it tax deferred. So you've gone from 0 cash flow to 80,000 of cash flow, and you've reclaimed your time.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. What's the most common situation that leads someone to your door? Why do clients find you? And again, what's the biggest blind spot that they bring in, if not a
They find us
misconception?
because of your podcast. I'll say that right away.
Thank you for the shout out. Appreciate it.
They find us because of that. Organically, meaning they'll go to an attorney, they'll go to a friend, they'll see us on LinkedIn. Somebody says
We also have a pretty big network
Yes.
of real estate agents or brokers. And again, that's all, a testament to what our mantra of education. So, whether we deliver CEs or informal education to real estate agents, CPAs, attorneys, that sort of thing, that's really what we're looking to, and how, quite frankly, most of our clients find us. And one of the biggest misconceptions I think you had asked about, what they're coming to the table with, is they may think that they have to invest all of their proceeds into a DST, or they are not aware that they can build a portfolio of DSTs. The minimums on DSTs are relatively low, 100,000. And when you're talking about selling investment property, even a $500,000 sale can be allocated into multiple different DSTs, which gives investors the diversification that we typically recommend.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to jump in because I think of a question that you will want to ask, or your audience will want to see. So if I'm an attorney, if I'm a professional out there, why the heck do I want to understand this, and what does it do for me? What's in it for me? And so here's the part that's in it for them. The more you understand about this, the better you are able to help somebody else increase their business. So I'll take an attorney that probably has in his network or her network a number of realtors they work with. So by giving them this idea, or having us present this idea to them, those realtors are going to get more listings, because they're going to come to Justin and they're going to say, so Justin, you want to list this house? Do you want to sell the property? And Justin's like, hell no, I'm not going to pay 30% to Uncle Sam. But you didn't say that. You're thinking that in your head. But if we change the discussion a little bit, kind of like what you do in your podcast, you're pivoting the mindset and say, so Justin, tell me about your investment real estate and how wonderful it is. Guarantee you, I'm going to listen to a sob story about something. And I'm going to listen more and more. So now that realtor who's a friend of the attorney is going to get more listings. And the attorney, and we work with others, when I say work with attorneys and CPAs, the question we ask CPAs is, of your 300 tax returns you did this year, how many have Schedule E items? And Schedule E is the rental real estate. And they're like, oh, about 100. Well, do you know for those 100 returns how much those clients are worth? And in effect, we're turning Justin into Justin Wealth Management from a real estate perspective. Pretty cool.
You just get to wear an extra hat, you know.
Not extra hat, or what some people say, another revenue stream or another place where you're helping somebody and then they're going to help you back, et cetera, et cetera. This is where really you can take one or two people, look at what their spokes on the wheel are, and say, have you talked to these people? And most of the time the answer is no, because they're like, well, I don't really know about a lot about this. I said, well, here's what I do know. Justin's a realtor and wants to get more listings. Game over. I
There you go.
I got your attention at hello. Would you like to make more money this year than last year?
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. So do you guys actively network with a lot of realtors,
Yes.
especially commercial real estate professionals? Are
We're
you
getting ready.
active?
We're getting ready to go out to Denver. Here's a fun gig for you. We're going to go out to Denver on a Tuesday, hang out at Pinehurst Country Club, do a happy hour and some CEs for realtors on a Tuesday, rinse and repeat on a Wednesday, and come home Wednesday night or Thursday. And there'll probably be 30 to 35 people in attendance each night.
Sounds like a rough life.
Well,
Somebody's got to do it.
Somebody's
Someone's
got
got
to
to do it. Offer it up, as my mom would say, right?
That's right.
Well,
Exactly.
gentlemen, I really appreciate your time. Again, I don't think we could even barely get down to where we need to be. So again, what I want to do is just refer people back to your website and tell them to get on that webinar and hear you guys out, hear the full perspective. I have a lot of attorneys that listen to this. A lot of them probably, maybe some people will find you because of this podcast and start working with you. If they do, let me know. I'm really, really curious to see how that goes. I'm glad to have you guys in my back pocket as well, because this sounds like something that, moving forward, is a strategy I want to at least look into. I'll need to amass an amount of capital that I could throw in, 100,000 or whatever, but pretty close. I've got 25K and an REI over here, REIT over here, and I've got my crypto, and I've got my stocks, and I've got a couple of real estate properties that I own myself. So we're getting there. I'm probably not quite ready to play in the league where you guys are in yet, but knowing that this is a thing is really exciting, and it gives me even something I might want to work towards in the future, which I think is really, really cool. So here in a minute, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you our closing 3 questions. They're the same questions I ask all of my other guests on the podcast. I'll give them to you now so you can percolate on them, and then we'll jump over, show your site again, and read from our last sponsor. But question number 1 is just this: if I gave you a magic wand and you could change something about your firm, your investment firm, what would you change? Number 2, if you can go back in time and give your younger self some advice other than the obvious, which is, of course, buy a lot of Bitcoin and hold it to 100K, what advice would you give yourself, and why? And number 3, if I gave you my magical pencil here, which is almost out of lead and almost out of eraser, but has just enough that it can change one law, write one new law, or erase a law from the books, what law would you change? Probably one that would affect the way you guys operate, but it could be just getting rid of parking tickets or taxes in general. We're in today is July the 2nd when we're recording this. We're in the lead up, of course, to Independence Day. So, not liking taxes is a very patriotic duty. So while you guys are percolating on that, let me jump over here really quickly and show your website again. Again, I am talking to Peter May and Ross Rubin, who are the brains behind the DST. I want to make sure I keep it was a DTS, DSTSherpa.com. Again, as always, we'll have a link down below. And if you guys want to reach out and get a hold of them, they have a contact form on their site, but they have this webinar down here. You can actually attend a complimentary webinar, and I honestly might attend this down the road myself, just because I want to be a part of it. Although there might be a glitch on your website, we're gonna have to look into that. But you guys can come out here, fill out their form, and get some information. Schedule a call with them. I think that they would be an amazing resource to invest. And of course, if you're in real estate, I actually deal with a lot of real estate professionals in what I do as well. Just I'm connected with a lot of them on LinkedIn. Being able to say, hey, have you considered this strategy to help your clients? You might look into them. So I will happily be referring to you guys on a pretty regular basis. I think it'll be pretty fascinating. So again, that's DSTSherpa.com, DSTSherpa.com. Our final sponsor for today is Habanero Social. Let me pull up the ad read for them. This episode is brought to you by Habanero Social. What if Google could send you free clients every month? With Habanero Social, it's not fantasy, it's reality. Habanero Social is an AI-powered platform that optimizes your Google business profile to attract more local customers effortlessly. From cranking out high quality content to managing reviews and fine-tuning your local SEO, Habanero Social handles it all while you sit back and watch your business grow. 95% of searches stay on page one of Google, and if it's a local search, 85% stay in that Maps pack on page one. So that Maps pack is where you want to be. An optimized Google business profile doesn't just show up, it engages, it builds trust, it increases clicks, and ultimately boosts your business. And Habanero Social is so confident that what they do will work that they offer a 3 times ROI guarantee. If you don't make back at least 3 times what you spent with them, they'll refund your money or work for free to make it right. Stop wasting time on old school tactics. Visit habanerosocial.com today and find a time to speak with a specialist about launching your business to page one of Google in the Maps pack with habanerosocial.com. There we go. All right. So, Peter and Ross, I guess question number one is I give you a magic wand and you can change something about your day-to-day operations. What would you change if you could change anything right now? And this is not meant to cause, disputes about partnerships.
I was just thinking
I
about
wish
that.
we could be everywhere all the time, ubiquitous in helping people understand more about DSTs. Look, we're like Peter mentioned, we're going out to Colorado to do that. And the magic wand would be, man, I wish we could, and there are others that are kind of lined up, as we go, but we can only do a certain amount at a time. So I'd love to be able to get everyone up to a certain level of education instantaneously.
What would I change if I could go back? I would do some of the things that we finally realized how to do today a year ago. It's kind of like the normal, it's like, oh my gosh, this is great. And then you're like, why didn't we do it sooner?
Yeah.
Oftentimes the journey is the learning curve that you wouldn't have without the other. And that's from law school, CPA time, all that kind of stuff is until you've skinned your knee and, as my dad say, rub a little dirt on it, boy, until you've done that, you haven't done it. And that's probably the hardest part.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Well, related then, especially with you answered that just a minute ago, Peter, but if you can go back in time and give yourself, maybe when you first got started, one piece of advice, something to look out for, a pitfall you're going to fall into, or just, what advice would you give yourself 20, 30 years ago?
Network more with a narrower focus and follow up, because everybody's always, I'm going to call these 100 people. And what we have found, and even like getting to today and connecting on LinkedIn, just work on the next 5. And the example that I use with that is my physician who says life is 15 patients. 5 you're treating, 5 you are going to treat, and the other 5 you hope to God stay on vacation, because you can't handle them all at once.
Good advice.
So my answer to that, Justin, would be, look, always have an open mind, and even some items that you discount or discard initially, always have an open mind towards them, because when you rethink about it or reimagine on it, you may find an angle or a perspective that it may very well be a benefit to you and it may work. So always have an open mind.
I think that's sound advice that everyone can benefit from. All right, so my magical pencil is almost out of lead, but is just enough to make a change. Peter, I give it to you. Ross, I give it to you. What change would you make and why?
Okay, I'll have to go back to my roots. Growing up in Texas, what would
So
I?
you're not a national born citizen. You're a Texan, is that right?
Well, I
That's
actually
right.
I was born in New Jersey, but then we moved to Texas way before, when there was still an Astrodome and a number of things. So growing up in Texas, the part that I found that I would have changed when I go to other parts of the country is, why do y'all have these speed limits anyway? Because the open road in parts of Texas, you're just driving and the speed limit is more of a suggestion, a recommendation. Obviously, at night, you don't want to drive faster than your headlights. I get that. But that's just the good old boy in me that just says, man, we need to be able to go faster because then I'll get off the road sooner. Safely, of course.
The U.S. Autobahn.
So mine's not as fun and interesting as Peter's, and probably more practical in terms of what we do professionally. Because as you know, the more certainty that investors and us as advisors have, the more effectively we can plan. So I would say, and the legislation is probably in process as we speak, and maybe will be resolved by the time we that folks are watching this podcast. But on the world of opportunity zones, that is a major piece of legislation that's going through. And they said that they're potential a dead zone period, but however that may be resolved, and looking forward to that being resolved so that we can more effectively plan in certain terms.
That sounds straightforward and good. Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
No, what I was saying is, this will be crazy funny, but we should record this with 2 different endings, and depending on what law passes, we'll tell you to put the other one in there, and so it'll look like we have predicted the future.
Well, for a small fee, I can
right. Choice A or choice B.
Yeah, to choose your own adventure, folks. That's how we roll around here. Well, Ross, Peter, thank you guys very much for being on the podcast. This has been informative. These are aspects I've never really considered before. And it's always one of the best parts of running this podcast is just learning new things. And of course, networking, meeting with people, and you never know where things go from there. So I really do appreciate your time with us today. I'll give you guys the last word. I always let my guests have the final word. Any last words of wisdom or parting thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Go ahead, Peter. What you got?
I stick to the script, which is, what's your reality, what's your ideal, and no matter where you are in life, you need to know where the exits are for yourself, for your family, and for future generations. The more you know, KNOW, the more you stay out of the NOs.
Amen. I couldn't say it better myself.
And always play with house money.
That true.
That one's going to stick with me for a good long while. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been The Attorney Post. I have been talking with Peter May and Ross Rubin of DST Sherpa and 1031 Sherpa. As always, though we deal with legal issues on this podcast, as well as today, financial and tax issues, this podcast does not constitute legal, financial, or taxable advice. And if you have an issue in any of those areas, please seek an attorney or investment firm that is knowledgeable in those areas that you need help with. Now, obviously, especially if you're looking at larger investing, if you're looking into DSTs, if you're looking into 1031 exchanges, I think Ross and Peter would be a really wonderful resource for you. So again, we'll have their links down below in the description. Feel free to check them out. If you're listening to this podcast or any of the major podcast repositories, always leave us a rating, give us a like or a share or whatever that you do there on YouTube, especially. Very helpful. Give us a thumbs up, give us a share, leave us a comment down below if you learned something or if you've got any feedback as well. But the number one thing you can do to help us grow this podcast is simply this. If you know someone who would benefit from the knowledge found in this podcast today, please share it with them. It takes 2 seconds to do, doesn't hurt anybody, and all you're going to do is make sure that they know what their future possibilities are. Because as I say, and as is the tagline of our show, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. The more you know, the more you can stay out of the know. Until next time, this is Justin signing off. Thank you guys for listening, and bye-bye.